This recording is for students in Computer Science 2500 at the University of Guelph. The purpose of this video is to help you understand what the difference is between pass by reference and pass by value, and just basically understand how functions are used in C programming. So let's start with the basic notion of functions. When you're programming in C, the first function you will write is main. Every C program has a main function. We usually call it int main void, and it might have some variables in it, like int my age, int new age, and you're going to call one or more functions as part of main. Quite often you call functions like printf or scanf, and those are functions that are built into libraries. But often you'll call functions that you've written as well. And a function that you've written can be thought of as just a black box of code or a white cloud of code. And when you call the function, the program leaves where it's going, goes to the function, stuff happens in the function, and then execution goes back to the point in the code where it left. So when we call a function, we literally go execute some code that is somewhere else in memory. So each function in the computer has its own spot in memory. And as you're executing that code, the variables for that function are laid out in memory. So in the case of these two functions, if we have a picture of memory here, when we call main, we have a variable called my age, and we'll say that maybe it's this memory location. And then we have another variable called new age that might be at some other memory location, probably the one right after, because they're declared one right after the other, but that's not necessarily so. They could be just about anywhere. And then we call this function. So we call one function, and one function has a parameter. And so the parameter is also, when this function is called, is also initialized and put into memory. So it'll be somewhere else in memory. Maybe it'll be in that one. And all of these variables get put into memory. So there's some definitions that you need to know and need to remember when you're working with functions and when you're thinking about functions. A function, let's actually give you a new way to look at that. So a function is a self-contained piece of code your program can use. Sometimes you write a function, sometimes you use libraries of functions like you would with printf or scanf. So in this example, the function is this self-contained piece of code here. I've written the post conditions for this function, and I've said that this function returns some parameter times the current day of the month. So if it was the 30th of the day, it would return the parameter times 30. Silly function, I know, but it gets the point across. And then we would have a value in new age based on whatever my age was. And you'll notice my code isn't complete. I didn't initialize these values or anything. This is just to talk about functions. So that's one definition you need to know. Function, self-contained piece of code. You need to understand what a function parameter is. So a function parameter is part of the function definition. The parameters are the variables in between the parentheses after the name of the function. They're in the function definition, and they're in the function declaration. Parameters are variables that are created in memory for the function when the function is called. So back to this example, this variable called SumParameter is this function's parameter. So another definition you need to know about functions, and that's the function argument. The function arguments are the variables you send to the function when you call it. They have to be the same type as the parameters. So in my example here, my age is the argument because this is where I'm calling the function. This is where I'm going to cause the function to start executing. In the function definition, that doesn't do anything to start the function executing. This is the parameter. Parameter, argument. Parameter, argument. It's kind of important to remember what each one is. So what happens when I call this function? Well, suppose that I had in here, I had written my age equals 21. So now I have a value for my age. So my age would have the value of 21 in it, in memory. When I call one function and I pass my age in as the argument, its value is copied into the memory location for some parameter. So when I call this, the 21 gets copied into the memory location for some parameter. And then this function does whatever it does, and it returns some parameter times the current day of the month. So its return value, let's say it's the second day of the month, and some parameter was 21, so it's going to return 21 times 2, which is 42, and that's going to be returned back to main, and this equal sign will assign that return value to new age. So new age is going to have the value of 42. That whole process is called pass by value because the value of my age is copied into the memory location for the parameter it's used, and whatever is done in this function doesn't actually affect my age. If I printed my age here and then printed it again after this function call, it would be exactly the same value. It wouldn't have any changes because of the function call. So that brings up another definition that you need to remember, and that is pass by value. So when you pass something by value, the variable itself is passed as the argument, and the value of the variable is used to initialize the function parameter. Okay, so in this example again, we have the variable. The variable is what we're sending to the function, and the variable initializes the function parameter. It gets its value there, and the value is passed. That's pass by value. We've also talked about pass by reference in class quite a bit. When you pass by reference, it's when you have a different kind of function. So suppose I have another function. This is toFunction. And its post condition is that it returns 1 if if a parameter, it returns 1 if a parameter is odd and 0 otherwise. But it does a second thing. It sets the value of a parameter equal to the current day of the month. So this function is doing two things. It is changing this value, and it's returning 1 or 0. So if we pass by value and we changed the value of this parameter, it wouldn't change the value of this address over here because there's two separate copies we've passed by value. What we really need to do is let the function know where my age is stored. And to do that, we pass by reference. A reference is exactly the same as a pointer. That's all it is. A pointer and a reference are nothing more than the memory address of any part of memory in the computer. So we have reference is the same thing as a pointer. To pass by reference, the function you're passing to takes a pointer. So here we have int star. Anything with a star is a pointer. In order to call the function, you need to pass it the address. So if I was going to call this function, I would say new age equals to function, and I would pass it the address of my age. So what does that do? Well, that is going to, my age is still 21. New age wouldn't have a value yet. All these other one-funct things would have already happened. Actually, new age would have a value, would have the value of 42. But then when I call the second function, my age is still 21. New age is currently 42. When I call to function, I'm going to get another variable, and that variable is a parameter. We'll put it up here. And we'll say that it is here. By the time we call it, some parameter would actually have been taken off the stack. So it would be empty again. So here we have our parameter, and what is passed is the address of my age. So if we say that this is 000 and position 001, our parameter holds 001 because that's the address of my age. And at the end of this function, what will happen is it returns 1 if our parameter is odd, and 0 otherwise. Well, I said that my age was 21, so that's definitely odd. So this function is going to return a 1, which will set new age to the value of 1. And it sets the value of our parameter equal to the current day of the month. Now, if you remember, I said it was the second day, so it goes to address 001 and sets the value there equal to 2. So now back here in main, when this function comes back, the value of new age is going to be 1, but the value of my age is going to be 2 because this function changed the actual value. And it can do that because we passed by reference instead of passing by value. And that leads us to the last definition for this video, which is pass by reference. When you pass by reference, the address of the variable is passed as the argument, and the address of the variable initializes the function parameter because it is also an address. So we have an address copied into an address, and then we use that address to manipulate the actual variable. In a future video, I will show how we use that address to manipulate the variables.